The IRS illegally targeting and mistreating conservative action groups like the Tea Party. The leader of Syria, Bashar Assad, using chemical weapons on the people of his own nation. Two radical Muslims setting off bombs at the Boston Marathon in the wake of the physical and emotional devastation that occurred on that fateful day. One of those terrorists is all of a sudden heralded as a celebrity in the eyes of foolish teenage girls who don't possess a nickel's worth of common sense. San Diego's Mayor Bob Filner, for many weeks resisting a call to resign until 20 different ladies come forward to complain of his sexual misconduct. August the 5th, 2013, Time magazine Eliza Gray writes, "It was hard to believe that New York City mayoral candidate Anthony Weiner could have fallen any further. But then an anonymous tip to a gossip website revealed on July the 22nd that he has continued his lewd online behavior more than a year after resigning from Congress in disgrace. Even after the birth of his child, while he's boasting to the press about the recovery of his marriage, it turns out that more unprintable fantasies have come out. He's been communicating online under the pseudonym of Carlos Danger. In another era, this would have ended his public life, but not today. Today in 2013, he appears the next day before the Big Apple's ravenous press, looking confident and in command with his wife beside him, defending his honor. She's given me another chance. I want to bring my vision to the people of New York City. The vision of Carlos Danger? No, thank you. We could do without it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a snippet, a tiny snippet of the incredibly wicked world in which we're living in today. We live today in a society in which citizens are not simply sinners anymore, making a myriad of mistakes as we all do, but rather we live in a society in which people are indeed repulsive, or as the title to your sermon suggests, bad to the bone. Do you know that with the prophetic pen, Paul warned us in the Word of God, this would be life at the end of time. Right before Christ comes back for us, it's going to get a whole lot worse. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1. But realize this, in the last days, and Hebrews 1:2 tells us the last days began with the ministry of Jesus and culminates with the second coming. In the last days, difficult times will come. Now, in the English, the word difficult just appears to be difficult, but that's not the way it's portrayed in the Greek. This particular word is used in Matthew 8:28 to refer to violent demoniacs. Violent demoniacs. So he's saying at the end of time, before Christ comes, you're going to see all kinds of demon-driven activity in the world in which you live. It's not going to get better until he comes. It will get worse. Don't be surprised when people are going berserk, ballistic in these last days. Someone said in the 1960s, people dropped acid to make the world look weird. And now in 2013, the world looks weird and people are taking Prozac to make it look normal. It is a bad, mad, sad world in which we live. And this passage of Scripture portrays it in living technicolor. Now, the problem is, many saints invest too much time in listening to the media's presentation of all the negative news. It's out there 24 hours a day, and it's dangerous to have a steady diet of that news. It affects a person's spiritual health. People say, I want to be informed, but the problem is they don't stop with being informed, they become incensed. I find myself at times listening to talk show radio hosts, but I have to be very careful, because if I listen to hour after hour of that, I find myself becoming like this, and I lose all the joy of my life. And that is the work of a demon as well. It's not the design of God. And you become angry, you don't know how to express it, so you repress it, and when you repress anger, you become depressed because you're living in dark and desolate days. Paul says, now listen, we're going to portray in living technicolor what the world looks like. Don't be shocked. Don't be surprised. Don't be chagrined. God's word prophesied this is exactly the way it must play out. It's just like in the days of Noah. It got to the place where every thought of man was constantly evil. Constantly evil. Then God sent the flood. Then God created a brand new world. And it will not be until the world gets unbelievably wicked and we're headed there on a freight train real fast that Christ is going to say, enough, I'm coming back. So it's all good news. We need to have a balance to this. As we look at it in that perspective, it could fuel our hope and it could fuel our happiness. Jesus gave us the perfect balance in this verse. John 16:33. He said, get ready. In the world, you're going to have tribulation. You know what that Greek word means? To crush. There's going to be crushings. You say, that's bad. That's sad. That's mad. Jesus says, yes, but be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. Isn't that wonderful? So there's the balance. But before we get to the good part, we must look at the difficult part. And in this particular section, in verses 2 to 9, Paul gives us what we call a catalog of carnality, a declaration of depravity. In this section, he's going to open the manholes and expose the sewer lines of humanity. And get ready, and if you could find a clothespin for your nose, you're going to need it. This section stinks. And within a few moments, you're going to see how bad it will be. That's what I love about the Word of God. It portrays the good points as outstanding, and it portrays the bad points as devastating. And we're going to preach it all. Amen? So Paul starts by saying, get ready for the stench, as we take a look at point 1, and that is, their character is despicable. Despicable. It's worse than bad. And here it is, verse 2. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money. Stop there. What's the word used twice? Lovers. What is he telling us? It's a heart problem that exists in the world today. People have been given a passion to worship God. And we're told of that in Romans chapter 1. But when man turns down his passion, his drive, his intensity for God, he has all this excess energy. What's he going to do with it? He will worship someone. He will worship something. And he'll spread it out, as we've seen, in all kind of crazy and bizarre activities that are splashed on the news before us every single day. We've been called to worship God, to love people, and use things. These folks have chosen to worship themselves, use God, and love things. You say, how do they use God? I see it all the time, even here at Orange Coast. People come to church all of a sudden out of the blue. Why? Because they're in trouble, they're hurting, they're depressed, there's a struggle in their life, and then God gives them something and you never see them again. They've used God. That is bad to the bone. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're to worship God. even if he doesn't give you what you want. Now, that's just a little side note as we go through this section. Lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, but they denied its power. Avoid such men as these. Wow, what a list. I count 19 sad characteristics. Let's examine them. The first is lovers of self. Someone said the smallest package you will ever find on earth is a man wrapped up in himself. That's so true. It's healthy to love yourself the way God loves you. It's sinful to be selfish. It's sinful to admire yourself. That's where narcissism comes from. Narcissist, the mythology, that he's walking down the road and he sees his reflection in a pond. And he loves the way he looks so much that he never leaves the pond for the rest of his life. That's a narcissist. They're always at the pond, always looking at themselves. Aren't I something? They're like the little hedgehog. The little hedgehog. It rolls itself up in a ball, keeping the soft, warm wool for itself, presenting the sharp spikes to the world. That's people today. You get the spikes, I get the wool. That's a lover of self. The next phrase, lover of money, or literally lover of silver. A kissing cousin is in Romans 1:29. Greed, pleonexia, echo to have, pleon more, to have more and more and more and more. It's a materialistic society in which we live. During the Leave It to Beaver days, Mom was able to stay home because the family, how could they do that? Get along with just one car. That was absolutely miraculous. Now it's 3 cars and a boat and everything else. And we're working 80 to 90 hours a week just to satisfy the need for materialism and greed. More and more and more. And we see this in our society today. Lovers of silver, lovers of self. And then the next phrase is boastful and arrogant. Boastful and arrogant. You know, there's a picture that stands out in my mind. I'll never forget this. Years ago at the Oscars, Shirley MacLaine had won an Oscar for her performance in a particular film. And rather than doing the proper thing, getting behind the microphone and thanking those who made her success possible, Shirley leaned into the mic with the Oscar in hand and said, "I deserve this." And she sat down. That's boastful. Now, this is the person who swaggers their way to the top, who has to be in control, who must be in charge in the church, in the home, at the place of employment, on the sports field. You see it all the time. That's bad to the bone. And if you have a tendency in your life to always be in control, confess that on your knees as sin before God. And humble yourself and ask him to give you grace and decency in your treatment of others. The next phrase is harder to see, and that's the word arrogant. It's the interesting word in the Greek, hyperphino. Hyper, like hyper, is over, and phino is to appear. These are people who appear to be over you. In other words, they seem to be the true servants, the true godly people of the world. I have a picture of that from my own experience. Years ago, there was a man who split a church I pastored 3 different ways, and it doesn't even exist anymore today. And he was always walking around the congregation telling people, "I only want to be a servant. I just want to be," and I always thought, this guy stinks. I don't like this attitude. I don't like people who talk about being a servant. Serve and shut up. Don't tell people how to be a servant. At all of our young married get-togethers, everybody being there laughing, joking. You know what he's in there? Washing the dishes. Ooh, what a servant. In the end, he came to me and said, "I am God's policeman. and I'm here to hand you a ticket. And he did everything in his power to kick me out of the ministry, to destroy the church, and then he did it to his father, who was a pastor, and his best friend. That is bad to the bone. Then you have revilers, the next term, blaspheme, from which we get blaspheme, right? Pheme is speech, blapto is injury. It's injurious speech, speech designed to destroy the character of God and the character of others. And how about that next phrase? Disobedient to parents. You say, how'd that get in there? You mean that can be bad to the bone? Do you know what it is? Paul uses it in the culmination of his catalog of carnality in Romans chapter 1 and verse 29. Now, we are not talking about a little teenage rebellion. We're not talking about the wise young man or woman who is learning to distinguish their life from the life of mom and dad. And they're slowly kind of cutting the emotional umbilical cord. They're learning what it means to be out there on their own. There's some questioning. There's a little disturbance. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about disobedience to the core. We're talking about people who refuse to listen to what mom or dad says, no matter what they may tell them. They resist authority, and in some cases, they will go as far as removing their parents from this planet. Remember the Menendez boys? Lyle and Eric? Lyle empties a shotgun into his parents and watches his mother crawl in her own blood, begging him to spare her life. And he calmly reloads and finishes her off, and then sits down in the mess and has a ham sandwich with his brother. That's bad to the bone. I told you this section stinks. How about the next word? Does that characterize you at times? It's characterized me. What is it? Let's say it. Ungrateful. You whine, you complain about everything on earth instead of thanking God for the gifts of grace. These are people who don't use the word thank you. They never fit in the vocabulary. I see this on a regular basis because I have a habit of holding the door open for people at any establishment I go to, whether it's the bank, I'm having a cup of coffee, whatever it may be, and I've been shocked at the number of ladies that I hold the door open for, and they don't look at me, they don't smile, they don't nod their head, and they don't say thanks. You know what that is? Bad to the bone. Bad to the bone. Don't do that. How about the next word? Unholy, which means they've lost reverence for God. And we could do that in a worship service by goofing around or refusing to worship God when we have an opportunity to sing and praise Him. We could even do that by thinking about our own problems instead of giving it all rest and giving our whole hearts to God. We don't want to go the route of becoming unholy. And then the next phrase, unloving. Now that's an interesting word. Astorge. What is storge? It's a unique love that describes in the Greek something that a mother shares with a child that a dad will never experience. 9 months of bonding in the womb creates a uniqueness between the mother and the child. That's a natural love. Storge. What does an alpha do? It negates the word. It's unnatural. People not showing natural love for their children. History is replete with illustrations to this fact. The Canaanites in the Old Testament offered their children in the fire to appease a pagan god named Molech. And during the wicked king Manasseh of Israel, they did the same thing, even God's people, tragically. The Persians would take unwanted babies and bury them alive. In Greece, Aristotle encouraged the nation to expose the weak and deformed children to the elements of nature to keep the population down. Tertullian, a writer in the first century, spoke of Roman life. He said, in Rome, we eliminate weak children by drowning them, starving them, or turning them loose in a pack of hungry wolves. That was life in Rome when Paul was writing. The Phoenicians and Carthaginians sacrificed children to their gods. In New South Wales, if a mother died, the child was buried alive with the mother. The altars of the Incas were drenched in the blood of infants. And in Peru, 200 children were sacrificed at the coronation of the great Inca. You say, that is bad to the bone. And those are pagan nations. I can't believe how evil they are. Yeah. And here in America, we butcher more babies every year than most of those nations combined through the celebrated murderous act we call abortion. It's unnatural, doesn't fit. The next word is irreconcilable. The root word means truce or agreement, and there's an alpha in front of it, so it negates it. These are not promise keepers, these are promise breakers. Do you know that's how the World War I began? My grandfather, my mom's dad, eventually died because of the effects of mustard gas in his lungs. Do you know why that ridiculous war began? Because an emperor called a solemn treaty a piece of scrap paper. A promise breaker created the deaths of millions of people. It's evil. It's bad to the bone. These are people who break business contracts and national treaties, and I guess they betray personal confidences. They just don't keep their word. Ever not keep your word? I've done that in the past. I try not to in the present. You say, how have you done that, Pastor? Someone says, Pastor, would you pray for me? Sure, I'll pray for you. Next Sunday comes around. Thanks for praying. God answered your prayer. Didn't answer my prayer because I didn't pray. That happens a few times, and then God said, you need to change the way you do things. And so what I tend to do is pray for them on the spot. And if I don't, minutes later, while I'm walking away, I pray. Because I don't want to be a promise breaker. I want to be a promise keeper. I don't want to be irreconcilable. And then how about the next phrase? Ooh, boy, now we're getting down to business now. Malicious gossips. We won't even ask for a show of hands. How many of us have done that? Most of us, if we were octopuses, could put up every hand, right? This term, when it occurs in the New Testament, here's what's interesting. Usually it's preceded by an article, and it's not called malicious gossips. Here's the way it's translated. Are you ready? The devil. And here's the principle. And I hope this gets us when it comes to gossip and causes us to really catch ourselves up short before we speak bad about someone. Let's use this principle. Share with me. Let's say it. When we engage in gossip, our vocabulary is driven by the devil. Every time you speak poorly about a person behind their back, Satan is speaking through your lips. Every single dastardly time. Every time. You know what the Greek word is for malicious gossips here? Diabolos. What word do we get from that? Diabolical. Balos, like ball, we get means to throw, and dia is through. It means to throw an accusation through a person. And the bad thing about gossips, it's done in a wimp's way. Any gossip is a wimp, is a peanut, is a loser, is a jerk. You know why? They don't have the guts to speak to a person's face. Right? They got to take the chicken's way out and speak behind their backs. That is demonic. And if I could begin to see it in this light, maybe I will slow down my gossip. Amen? Not too many amens on that one. Not too many amens. Someone said the conversation between Adam and Eve must have been very difficult at times because they had no one to talk about. Gossip is a negative that has been developed and enlarged. It's a great definition. Wife said to her husband, everyone in the church is talking about the Smiths' quarrel. Some are taking her side, some are taking his side. And the husband said, and I suppose a few eccentric people are actually minding their own business. Be eccentric. Mind your own beeswax. Gossip is diabolical. It's wrong to speak it, and guess what? It's wrong to hear it. It's wrong, it's a sin to hear it. So if someone comes to you with negative news about another, I can't hear you, that's a good response right there. Don't talk to me. This is not my business. I'm not God. I'm not capable of handling what you say in a judicious sense. The words that you will share with me about that person are going to color my outlook on that person, and I don't know if you're speaking the truth or not. So you go to that person and you speak to them. And remind them as they leave, the best thing to do behind a person's back is to pat it. Malicious gossips. Wow. And then the next phrase, without self-control, to be unrestrained, uninhibited, no governor on their impulses or drives. And then the word brutal. What does brutal mean? It means brutal. It means untamed, savage, fierce, or cruel to the core. You look at some people and go, how could you be like that? We are told by historians as a child, Nero used to amuse himself by pulling the legs and wings off of insects. He loved to see living things suffer. That's why it's no surprise when he became the emperor of Rome, he would take Christians, dip them in pitch, set them on fire to light up his garden parties by night. Years ago, we had a little junior Nero in this church. Little 4-year-old boy. The kid was tweaked from the day I saw him. And I knew something was desperately wrong, and so did Christina. One day in the fellowship hall, when we saw him with a couple of insects, pulling the wings off of those insects. And I thought, that kid is headed for trouble. That is bad to the bone. He's cute. He's not cute. He's evil. Needs to be addressed and dealt with. If not, God knows what's going to happen in the future. Reckless, treacherous, haters the good. Look at these statements. Haters the good, the vile and vicious attitude towards anything that's virtuous. You know what the word treacherous refers to? Its noun form is used in Luke 6:16 to speak of Judas. Who is treacherous? The one who has betrayed your confidence. Some of you know what it's like to suffer the slings of treachery. You had a person who called himself your close friend. You confided a truth or a secret, and they turned and slandered you. That's treachery. That is bad to the bone. Reckless, again, out of control, people who advance more and more into violence, engaging in any type of activity that they choose and justifying it, and people, like we mentioned with those terrorists, the Boston Massacre, applauding it. That's treachery. There's something sick and terribly bad about those people. Terribly evil. And they are, what's the next word? Conceited. You know what interests me? That out of 19 characteristics, there is one sin mentioned 3 times. 1. Conceited, verse 2, boastful and arrogant. If we put conceited, boastful, and arrogant together, what one sin are we dealing with that begins with the P? Pride. Pride. Pride is, in God's eyes, are you ready? The worst of all sins. the worst. And yet people engage in it. They think it's funny, clever. Spotlighting myself. On a farm in the east, there was a pond. It was a home to a couple of ducks and a little frog. They became great friends. But as the spring began to move into summer, the pond started drying up. And the ducks had a conversation. They said, you know, we could fly to another pond, but what about our friend the frog? What are we going to do about him? And one duck had a brilliant idea. He said, I know what we'll do. We'll take a little stick, and we'll hook it up between our two bills, and Mr. Frog could latch on with his mouth, and we'll fly our little friend to another pond. And they tried it, and lo and behold, it worked. And they're flying over this field about 35 feet up in the air, and a farmer looked up and goes, my, what a clever idea. Wonder who thought of it. Frog said, I did. And Proverbs 16:18 says, pride will always precede a fall. And you need to remind yourself, I need to remind myself, the next time you're boasting about all the people you've known, and all the things you've accomplished in life, and all the places you've done, and all your great achievements, you need to whisper to yourself, God hates it. And you're just about ready to take a major tumble. Because when you exhibit pride, you're going downhill. We're told in Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 17, it's one of the top 10 sins that God hates, and he certainly hates it above all other sins. The reason why, it's the first sin committed against God by the devil himself. So again, when I enter into pride, I'm in the same category as gossip. I'm being driven now by the devil. Some sins are driven by the flesh. Some sins are driven by demonic activity. Pride is one, and another one is malicious gossip. And then we have the phrase lovers of pleasure instead of lovers of God. Does this mean we have to choose between the person of God and pleasure? Of course not. Martha quoted a verse for us today in worship. She gave a part of it. I'm going to give you all of it. It's Psalm 16:11. In your presence, O Lord, is the fullness of joy. And at your right hand there are what? Pleasures forever. Listen, the happiest people on earth are the holiest people on earth. The people who walk with God, the people who worship him and have an excellent attitude are the ones who have all the joy, all the smiles, all the happiness, all the thrill that the folks of the world are so desperately seeking for because they can't get their passion centered on the person of God. And so they center it on anything else that gives them ultimate pleasure. Doesn't it amaze you that the best time of the week to drive the Southern California freeways is 8 o'clock on Sunday morning? Why is it vacant? They are sleeping off the hangovers from the night before, drugging it out, drinking it out, partying it out, because they're looking for meeting. And they're looking in the wrong direction. And we, by the grace of God, need to point them to the only one who could satisfy that direction. And if you have that lifestyle today where you are doing drinking, or you are entering into drugs, or you're playing games with the rest of that junk of the world, you need to be taking that passion and spending more time with Jesus and his people. And as you do that, you'll discover you don't need the rest of that junk. I became a Christian in 1965. In the late 1960s, as I was about ready to complete high school, the whole crazed hippie era began. And everyone was offering me every kind of paraphernalia you could imagine. And I said, nope, 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 nope. And it wasn't some great spiritual move. I didn't want it. I was already happy. I already had the joy. I already had the high of life. Because I knew the one who gives that high. It's the Lord Jesus. And there's no hangover after spending time with Christ. Isn't that wonderful? He's the one who gives the true pleasure. Well, that's the first fact about the folks who are bad to the bone. Their character is despicable. The second fact, Paul says, is that they are crafty and depraved. Crafty and depraved. Look at verse 5. Oh, they hold to a form of godliness, but they denied its power. What does that mean? That means you'll find them in church. That's what that means. You'll find them carrying the Bible and quoting scriptures. And tragically, at times, rising to positions of leadership in the church. I've seen this in every church, including here at Orange Coast. Not recently, so don't look around. It's been years. People like this who are ungodly, who are crafty and depraved, are very charismatic. And they find themselves loved by everyone, and they love the drunkenness of power that comes with that. And so they worm their way into situations. They have the piety, they have the lingo, but again, no real passion for the person of Jesus. That's the whole key that I look for in life when I talk to a person. When I'm trying to ascertain a person's spirituality and where they are with God, I want to know what they think about Jesus. I want to know what turns them on. I want to know what fires them up. Because when you're fired up at the person of Christ, then you are given the absolute proof that Jesus is number one, and you're set, you're okay. But if you're not fired up with him, something else is going to come along, and you're going to pour the passion into that. That's what these folks do. They're crafty and depraved. Christianity for them is a game. And verse 6 says, they are those who will enter in folds, and they captivate weak women, weighed down with sins, led on by various impulses. Enter in means to sneak or to creep craftily. They walk in and they captivate. That's a military term. It means to capture by spear. To capture by spear. And who do these charismatic people spear? Weak women. It's happened for many years. It happens on television. As these women who are sensitive but weak-minded are writing out their checks to people who don't have a nickel's worth of character on television and who call themselves very crafty. That was the main reason why the great humorist and author Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, never became a Christian because he watched his mother give all their money to the traveling evangelist who would come into town and set up a tent and rip people off and leave on a rail. And he said, if that's Christianity, I want nothing to do with it. And when those evangelists, if they're saved, get to heaven, they will have to answer for the future of what happened to Mark Twain. These are people who like to captivate and control and manipulate. What does it mean to be weak? You know what the Greek word means? Stupid. Silly. Dum-dum. Numbskull. Take your choice. Weak women, weak men. On a drive in the country, a city slicker noticed a farmer who was lifting up one of his pigs to an apple tree. And he held the pig up as it ate apple after apple after apple. Then he put it down, picked up the second pig, and ate the apples. Then put it down, picked up a third pig. And the city slicker said, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but if you just shook the branches, the apples would fall to the ground, you'd save time. Farmer said, time? What does time matter to a pig? Not the sharpest pencil in the drawer. Albert Einstein said there are only two things that are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the former, but he is sure about the latter. These are people who just don't think. I pastored a church years ago. There was a sweetheart of a lady who had been well informed and taught the Scriptures. She had no reason to do what she did. But I discovered, much to my shock, that for months she had been entertaining missionaries from a cult in her house every Tuesday night. I said, "Hello? Anybody home? Don't you know their doctrine is deceitful and deadly?" She said, "But they're so friendly and so nice." That's what he's talking about here. Don't be an idiot. Don't think that everyone who calls himself a Christian is a Christian, and everyone who is on Christian radio is speaking the truth. Use discernment. Think. Don't fall under the category of being weak, silly, and stupid. 2 passages and 2 principles. The first passage, leave here for just a moment, go to the end of your Bibles to 2 John, and there's only 1 chapter, so it should be easy to find. 2 John, there's 1 John, 2nd and 3rd John. 2 John, look at what he says in verses 7 to 11. This is the first passage. 2 John, verses 7 to 11, right before Revelation. Look at verse 7. "For many deceivers have gone into the world, those who do not acknowledge that Jesus Christ is coming in the flesh. This is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch yourselves that you don't lose what you've accomplished, but you may receive a full reward. Anyone who goes too far and does not abide in the teaching of Christ does not have God. The one who abides in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. For if anyone comes to you and doesn't bring this teaching, don't receive him into your house. Don't give him a greeting like hello, for the one who gives him a greeting participates in his evil deeds." He's speaking of the cultic activity of Gnosticism, which is the forerunner of all the modern cults that are knocking on your doors every Saturday. He tells us, you beware of that. That's the first passage. The second passage is 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Let me sum it up for you in these words. Examine everything. Examine everything. Look deeper. Those are your passages. Here's the principles. Number 1, test everything on the basis of this book. Because Jesus said in John 17:17, your word is truth, and so we know it's absolute. Test everything on the basis of this book. And here's the second one. You ready? Trust your intuition. The Holy Spirit, when he's residing in your heart, will oversee your intuition and your conscience. That's what we're told in the book of 1 John. You don't need a teacher. He will teach you all things. You listen to him. He will guide you into all truth. He will show you the right way. Verse 8. Just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, these men opposed the truth, depraved of mind, rejected in regard to the faith. You say, who's Jannes and Jambres? Well, you won't find their names in the Bible. That's right. Their names are found in what's called the Targum of Jonathan. The Targum of Jonathan was an Aramaic paraphrase of the Old Testament with interpretive comments. Now, the Aramaic language, most likely Jesus spoke in this language. It was very similar to Hebrew. And so this book was probably very similar to a Ryrie Study Bible, little comments at the bottom of the text. Jannes and Jambres, he who seduces and the rebellious one, that's the meaning of their names. They were Pharaoh's magicians. And they're mentioned in Exodus 7:11 and verse 22. Their names are not given, but their personages are brought up. They're the guys who performed counter miracles to Moses. You remember how it happened? God sent Moses down, and he said, Aaron, take that staff, and you throw it down, and it turned into a snake. And Jannes and Jambres threw down their staffs, and it turned into snakes. Pretty good. Until Aaron's snake ate up their snakes. Woo boy. And then Moses turned the water into blood, and Jannes and Jambres did the same. But after that, they had to slow down pretty rapidly. They couldn't keep up with the great miracles and the majestic God. And when Jannes and Jambres, according to Hebrew tradition, realized that the Exodus was inevitable and there was no way out, they decided if you can't beat them, baby, you join them. And so according to tradition, they faked conversion to Judaism, as a lot of people did at the Exodus. That's why in Exodus chapter 12, they're called the mixed multitude. There were some believers, there was a lot of unbelievers. And Jannes and Jambres, according again to Jewish traditions, are the ones who, when Moses was on the mount receiving the tablets of God, incited Aaron and the people to enter into calf worship, which led in Exodus 32 to the destruction of 3,000 people killed with the sword that day. Stay away from crafty, charismatic people who will sway you away from the truth with their charisma. That's what he's talking about in this section. Hypocrites and fakers. Now the good news is verse 9. They will not make further progress. Their folly will be obvious to all, just as Jannes and Jambres' folly was also. This leads us today to the lasting lesson. Say it with me, because you need an uplift after this downpour. Here we go. It may be bad, but it's bound to get better. Isn't that great? That is the teaching from Genesis to Revelation. And Paul kind of gives you a snippet of there after all this stuff in verse 9 by saying it's not going to endure forever. It may be bad, but it's bound to get better. Here's the good news. Evil has a limited shelf life. It's not going to hang around forever. In the end, God wins. You want proof? Read it right here in the pages of this book called the Bible. Yes, we saw for many months that Joseph was treated in a treacherous way by his brothers, but in the end, Joseph lived to see justice in his life, didn't he? And how about Moses? After all the hassles and heartaches he went through, he freed the slaves, he silenced the Pharaoh, and he brought the people safely through the Red Sea. How about David? With that little sling and a stone, he took down a 9-foot, 6-inch beast. He killed the mocking man. How about Jesus? He got up and walked out of the tomb. And 12 motley crew called the disciples turned the world upside down with the gospel of Christ. So don't be blown away as you look at how bad it is, because it's bound to get better. You just need to have that attitude. It was an unusually foggy morning, like it is today, at LAX. Huge aircraft was ready for takeoff, and all the passengers were quiet as the jet roared down the runway. The huge aircraft rocketed into the overcast and was quickly encompassed by a dense fog, which totally hid the silver wingtips of the plane from all the passengers. And people were kind of overwhelmed by the fog. And then all of a sudden, bam! It burst through the soupy overcast and right into the dazzling sunlight. And one man broke the silence with these words. I suppose every day is a sunny day, if we could just get enough altitude. Let's bow together. If you're a Christian this morning, it's your attitude towards adversity, towards the problems of the world, that will make all the difference in the world for you. See it for what it is. Call a sin a sin. But hang on to your hope in the goodness of God. Yeah, it looks bad. It's bound to get so much better for you, child of God. If you're not a Christian, I'm here to tell you it's not your attitude, it's not your aptitude that will get you to glory. You need altitude. And fact is, you won't rise 3 feet above the grave unless you know the risen Savior. He's the one who died to silence your sins, and he rose to prove that he's God. And he wants to provide you with liftoff on that final day when you bid adieu to this planet. But you have to know him personally. And you must live for him passionately. Do you know him today? Can you pinpoint a specific time in which you said, Christ, come into my life, become the love of my life forever? If you've never made that decision for Jesus Christ, and you want to make that today, you want the hope, you want the happiness, you want the home in heaven, and you want to give your life to Christ to receive that today. And when no one's looking around, I just ask you to raise your head and look at me in the eyes. And I will know of your desire to give your life to Christ for the first time today. You can do that right now.